Shine your love on us, beautiful souls, unity in love, spirit and angels watching over us. Hello, welcome to Mystic Mindfulness. I'm Christine. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to go through grieving versus suffering and how that happens, what that is, and some of the outline for what I want to follow. And I am reading out of this. I wanted to discuss ego attachments, the insights I've gained from this book called The 5 Levels of Attachment by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. It's a great book. And then there's another great book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And this one's written by Junior. But this is the one that I'll be grabbing insights from. So from that, I'll discuss the losses I've suffered, why the losses, the matrix, soul contracts, and reincarnation, and then suffering. So the losses that I have suffered through my life, I feel were preparations for what was going to come in my later years. So for example, my dad leaving was the first big loss that I had ever experienced. In high school, I had done my senior project, which was observing an emergency room, and I saw a man come in who had had a heart attack and he had passed on. That was my first real experience with death. I had never seen a body that had passed on before. So that was pretty intense for me. Then the death of my dog Perk. We lived out in the country, and the experience that I had with that, he was getting sick and ill. And of course, this is years ago. So today, obviously, you would take your dog to the vet and get it euthanized. We didn't have that opportunity. So we just took the dog out to the pasture and shot the dog. And that was right after I had graduated from high school. So that death for me was also pretty intense, and yet it was still prepping me for what was to come. And so yeah, there's been a lot of grieving in my life, and it's all been for this, I believe, one purpose. So as far as the matrix goes, when you study quantum physics, and there's more and more scientific proof for quantum physics, there's a lot of scientists out there who are leaning more towards we are living in a matrix. And so I'm just saying that there is that possibility that we are living in a matrix, and that matrix would be like a hologram or a simulation for us to learn our life lessons. And my personal belief in this is that if it is a matrix that we're living in, and I do believe personally in reincarnation based upon scientific studies of that based upon other things that I've also researched, for me personally, I believe that we are reincarnated and that we come in to this realm with a plan, with a purpose, what we want to learn, life lessons that we want to, learn through living here. So I also believe personally that with this, we make soul contracts with individual people prior to reincarnating. So in the spirit realm, we make agreements on what lessons we want to learn, who's willing to cooperate with those lessons we want to learn, and those are the soul contracts we come in with. Excuse me. For me, this makes a lot of sense personally. Again, I just want to make sure I'm using the word personally, because this is not a set system of belief that I expect everybody to follow. These are just my personal ideas, okay? Personal concepts based upon my own studies and research that I've done. I'm not telling you what to believe. So, based upon my own personal beliefs on research and studies that I have done, I believe that we do come into this realm, into this matrix, into this simulation, into this hologram with people we've agreed to be in contact with so we can learn the life lessons. And so through all of my grieving, if I look at what lessons have I learned through the grieving process, and I'll talk about more of those losses. So I wanted 6 kids. I've mentioned this before. I wanted 6 kids before I turned 30. I was watching all of my friends purchase homes, get their new cars, have their kids, and it just felt like I was constantly pushing against resistance, always against resistance. Like I couldn't get where I wanted to get quick enough. Like I was just struggling so hard, pushing against things that there was a constant resistance. And I was starting to get really angry and frustrated in this process. Couldn't get pregnant. It took me years to get a first house. Couldn't get where I wanted to get quick enough. Okay, so then lost my son, which I've mentioned in previous videos. You can go back and watch those. Dealt with that whole grieving process. Took me another 2 years to get pregnant with my daughter. As soon as I was pregnant with, or as soon as she was about a year old, when my husband, who I was married with at the time, lost his job, we lost our house, lost our cars. And I say lost, we had to sell everything, so we didn't go bankrupt or anything. We sold the stuff before we went through that process, but that was a huge grieving process for me too. I finally was in the house of my dreams, have a child, have a nice, beautiful vehicle I'm proud to be driving in, and now we have to turn around and sell everything and move out into what I felt like was the slums of the neighborhoods, in a manufactured home park that had just recently been subdivided into properties. So we were able to buy it's a very small property because it was a manufactured home park at one point, but it was still in the ugliest part of town that you could even imagine. So I was not impressed. I was embarrassed and I was ashamed of it. And then let's see, I know that there's some other things. Pardon me, my voice is kind of cutting out here. Okay, so from there, I guess it just felt like everything that I was trying to work for was a huge resistance for me. It didn't come freely or easily. And I'm not saying that, I mean, everybody works for what they get, right? We all work hard for what we get, but this felt like resistance, like it didn't want to come to me at all. And then when I did have everything that I felt like I wanted in life, it all fell apart on me. And then I got my divorce, which I left, but there's still a grieving process with that too. It's not like, I got married and said, well, in about, 20 years from now, I'm just going to get a divorce. Nobody does that. They go into a marriage hoping for the best. And so you deal with that too. There's a grief with that. So from looking back, what I have discovered that my life purpose and plan has been through those experiences was to get to this place where I am today. And this book helped me discover that. So the reason for the suffering for me was that I was always looking for external things that would make me feel like I was enough, that I was valued, that I had self-worth, that people would like me. And when I finally achieved all of those things, I felt like I was finally validated as a human, that I could actually, people would like me, and that I had substance. And so instead of just the grieving that I was dealing with, I was also dealing with the suffering. Because now, what is my value? What is my worth? Do I have value? Do I have worth? Will people like me? And again, this goes back to the previous video that I recorded on the traumas from childhood. So I was the people pleaser. I wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want to create waves. And a lot of that goes back to also wanting to be valued, wanting to be accepted. I didn't want to create conflict. I was afraid of the conflict. And it all goes back to the trauma. So if you can pinpoint trauma in your own life from childhood wounds, most likely the suffering that you're experiencing through the grieving process of loss, it could very well be due to an attachment to something because you needed that external validation. And so for religion, I did this with religion as well. I created a box for myself to live in because now it felt safe. And I made sure that I aligned with everybody's belief systems so that I could be approved of and accepted. And so I had this nice, neat box for religion that I was living in. I had my whole church family that I was a part of, the Bible studies. I had created my family right there, and it felt so secure and it felt so stable and so strong. I mean, I made sure that everybody was believing the same thing. I asked questions in Bible studies all the time about, what do you guys believe about this? And what do you guys believe in? What do you think? Because I wanted to be on target. And then I really started questioning for myself as well, how is this? This is in direct contradiction within the Bible, like once saved, always saved, or can you lose your salvation? Then does hell even exist? I started asking these kinds of questions as well. Predestination or free will? They're in contradiction. So, and that brings up a good point, because if you think that, for me, my personal beliefs is that we come in here into this realm with a purpose and a plan, and we choose that purpose and plan for ourselves, then it's predestination because it's predestined, and yet we also have free will. We had free will to choose, and it's the bigger concepts. I feel like it's the bigger concepts out there that the purpose is, and any smaller, minute details involved are up to us and how we want to get there. So that completely abolishes the whole argument or the debate between predestination and free will. So that's completely done, and it goes along then with the Bible, if you want to use the Bible as a form of personal belief, that that those two concepts can coincide equally in harmony. So through the sufferings that I've experienced, including my suffering of losing my religion, it all came back to my attachment to those things and why the attachments were there in the first place. And how I can live a free, happy life, being completely content with who I am as a person and being enough as a person, not having to be attached to things and prove to other people that, hey, look, I'm worthy. I can hold up to the same standards of living that you guys can too. It doesn't matter. I don't. I'd be happy just wherever I'm at, because I'm content and happy with who I am within myself. I'm free to live, free to love, and that's where I would like everybody to get to. If we can just lose our attachments, ego attachments to things that make us feel like we're enough, because you are enough without all of those external things. So by seeking validation from others, you give your power away. Seeking opinions, approval, justification, trust your gut, your own intuition. You are enough, you are worthy, you are fill in the blank for yourself. Is my value and self-worth dependent upon others' acceptance or approval of what I do? This concept stems from make the family or church look good. Stuff your feelings. That's not telling you to do that. Don't do that. But that's what they teach. Often, not all. I don't want to say that either, but a lot of religions teach that. And this is a form of codependent behavior, which in turn creates patterns for suffering. We've heard the term wearing a mask. People have false identities and put on personalities. They're gregarious, they're boisterous, they're extremely outgoing. And I'm not saying that all people who are that way have a mask, but a lot of times we're putting on personalities that don't belong to us either, because we want to be accepted by other people. We want to be approved of. We attach ourselves to external things in order to feel accepted, loved, validated, and worthy. And when we do that and we come up against the loss of the attachment that we feel is providing that for us, we soon find ourselves not just grieving the loss, but suffering through the loss. And looking back on the losses that I've experienced, the suffering through the grief that was, just compounded, I can look back and go, everything that I've experienced up until this point has been either a preparation for the big, huge losses in my life. So it kind of prepared me for grieving. And they all taught me the same lesson. I'm enough. I am worthy. I am loved, without having to prove it to anybody else. So that's where I'm at today, and I wanted to pass that along to you. I hope you, through your grieving processes and through your losses, can find that same sense of contentment with who you are as a person. Much love to you. I wish you a wonderful day. We'll talk again soon.